to get on with the show.
I know, but I mean, it sounds so awful. Like, is that all I did? Wow.
Deleted scene from Star Trek 1966. No one was supposed to see. Do you remember? Back in 1966, when television screens still glowed a pale bluish green, and America gathered in front of wooden TV sets every Friday night, a show was born called Star Trek. Star Trek wasn't just a story about distant stars. It was a collective dream where science, philosophy, and humanity intertwined in every frame. Gene Roddenberry once said, "I wanted to see how much truth television could handle." And he meant it. From its very first season, NBC was forced to confront images that made the network hesitate. The bodies of children amid ruins in Miri, moments of intimacy deemed beyond moral standards. And most of all, a psychologically dark scene so disturbing that the network supervisor halted the broadcast, filed an emergency report, and ordered the reel locked away immediately. It wasn't until more than half a century later, when Paramount restored the original 35mm prints, that fans were shocked to discover there once existed a very different Star Trek, bolder, darker, and far more profound than anyone remembered. 10. Morphine was not allowed to exist. The banned substance that forced the entire episode to be rewritten. In Harlan Ellison's first draft, the tragedy that launches the entire story did not come from a fictional drug. McCoy, panicking after a minor accident aboard the ship, accidentally injects himself with an overdose of morphine, sending him into a delirious state. In that frenzy, he flees the Enterprise and leaps through the Guardian of Forever. That was supposed to be the ignition point for a heart-stopping tale about destiny, responsibility, and the price of tampering with history. But as soon as NBC read the script, a problem appeared. Primetime television in 1967 had extremely strict rules, the names of real illicit substances. Especially opioids were explicitly forbidden. The network feared that showing McCoy the Enterprise's chief medical officer, a symbol of morality and science, associated with morphine even by accident, would damage his character's image and set a dangerous precedent for family television. Using the name of a real drug was considered a violation of broadcast ethics. Local stations might even refuse to air the episode. The result, morphine was removed entirely and replaced with cordrazine, a fictional compound functioning like an adrenaline overdose. Cordrazine was sci-fi enough to avoid controversy, yet strong enough to drive McCoy into the delirium the story required. But the change made the opening less sharp. Ellison's original metaphor about drug misuse with all its social weight became softer, safer, when replaced by a fictional substance. Viewers no longer saw McCoy as a casualty of medical failure, but simply as someone who had an accidental reaction to an invented drug. And yet the remarkable thing is this: the episode's core tragedy and sense of destiny remained just as powerful. McCoy still pushes the timeline off its axis. Kirk still faces the brutal choice: save Edith Keeler or save humanity's future. And the audience still feels their heart tighten as the time portal closes. One small change, a different drug name, but a vivid reminder of the tight control Star Trek was under. Even tragedy had to stay clean enough for American television in the 1960s. 9. The kiss that terrified the network. Kirk and Uhura and the forbidden line of 1960s TV. In Plato's Stepchildren, 1968, Star Trek ventured closer than any American television series had ever dared to break a decades-old taboo, showing a white man and a black woman kissing on national television. Today, the kiss between Kirk and Uhura is remembered as historic, but few know NBC monitored it with suffocating caution, and it came dangerously close to being erased entirely. In the original footage, the kiss does not come from affection, but coercion. Kirk and Uhura are telekinetically controlled by the Platonians, forced against their will until their lips meet. The camera holds extremely tight on them, emphasizing Kirk's helplessness and Uhura's expression of anger mixed with despair. Nichelle Nichols portrayed Uhura as a woman maintaining dignity, while being mentally coerced, making the scene far heavier than any televised kiss of its era. But only hours after seeing the assembly cut, NBC sounded the alarm. The issue wasn't the kiss itself, but the socio-political climate of 1960s America. Many Southern affiliates still held the right to refuse content deemed racially inflammatory. An interracial kiss, even one under duress, crossed that forbidden line. NBC demanded a solution film, a no-kiss version. In that version, Kirk and Uhura would be pulled close, but their lips would not touch. The network planned to keep both cuts and let local stations choose whichever version would avoid backlash. But Shatner and Nichelle Nichols refused to let that happen. They intentionally ruined every no-kiss take, looking into the wrong direction, blinking theatrically flubbing lines until the alternate version became unusable. In the end, NBC had only one broadcast left, the one with the kiss. Despite censorship pressure, political anxiety and studio compromise, the kiss aired nationwide. And in just a few seconds on screen, Star Trek shattered one of American television's strongest taboos, becoming a cultural milestone far beyond the confines of a single episode. It marked the moment Star Trek dared to confront the real divided America and dared to open the first small door toward change. 8. Red sequence, the Kirk torture scene. NBC erased. Within 24 hours, if you only watched the 1966 broadcast version, Kirk strapped to the metal chair might look like just another tense moment. But that was only a sanitized shell. In the original cut, the one the crew called the Red Sequence Kirk wasn't just restrained. He was psychologically tortured in the most literal sense in a scene NBC deemed too dangerous for any family audience to witness. In the unaired version, Kirk is pinned tightly to the chair, the straps pressed so hard across his chest and shoulders that he can barely take a full breath. Red light floods the room, flickering like a psychological interrogation device. The camera stays on Kirk's face for an unnervingly long time, sweat running in streams, his eyes wide, pupils darting, jaw clenched, as if he were fighting off an invisible invasion crushing his will. But the true horror lies with Helen Noel. In the original cut, she isn't just a bystander. Her face appears in panic and guilt, helpless, as she watches her commanding officer, a man who trusted her, have his mind violated. A POV shot from Helen's perspective shows Kirk swallowed by red light, while Dr. Adams stands beside him, icy calm, increasing the device's power level one notch at a time. The imagery creates a naked metaphor, absolute power invading a person's free will, while the only witness can do nothing but watch. When NBC viewed the sequence, they didn't hesitate for even a minute. In internal notes, they described the scene as severe psychological torture with implications of coercion, mental/intimate violation, something absolutely forbidden in prime time. The network also warned that showing Kirk screaming, losing control, and nearly collapsing would destroy the invincible hero image they were determined to protect at all costs. Cutting the red sequence didn't just remove an intense moment. It stripped the episode of its darkest message, the terror of losing free will, humanity, and identity while still conscious. In the broadcast version, the neural neutralizer feels like a mild sedation device. In the original cut, it is a symbol of power abused to the point of erasing a soul. One deleted scene, but it carried the moral heart of the entire episode. 7. Miri, the Dark Truth. Hidden. A planet of dead children. If there is one episode of Star Trek that left the entire crew silent after the first assembly cut, it was Miri. Not because of the reverse aging disease or the duplicate Earth setting, but because of a scene erased so quickly that today it survives only through scattered recollections, a street littered with the bodies of dead children. In the original script, when Kirk, Spock and the landing party arrive, they were meant to witness one of the saddest images in the entire series. The camera would glide past the sudden remnants of childhood, a stroller tipped onto the curb, a half-open schoolbook on the sidewalk, a teddy bear lying face down on the pavement. And among these familiar things were small, motionless bodies, bloodless, but unmistakably showing that an entire world of children had collapsed within a few terrifying hours. According to the director's notes, the scene was designed as a 3-shot sequence, a toy rolling in the wind, a child's hand sticking out from under a hastily thrown cloth, and at the street corner, 2 small bodies lying side by side as though they had tried to run but never made it. Only a few seconds. Only mannequins. But for American television in 1966, it crossed an absolute line. NBC viewed the cut and immediately ordered remove everything. No images suggesting the death of children may be broadcast. Family-safe standards were so strict that even wounded adults required caution, let alone child corpses, even fake ones. But the mass death of children was the emotional core of Miri. A life extension experiment had failed catastrophically, wiping out every adult and leaving children to live unusually long, only to die painfully the moment puberty began. Without visual evidence that tragedy feels softened, wrapped in an unnecessary layer of safety. As a result, the broadcast version is left only with dialogue and frightened expressions from the surviving children. A message meant to be devastating, do not tamper with life, and longevity becomes muted. One deleted scene, but it took away the very soul of Miri. 6. The buried love scene. One of the rare moments Spock lost emotional control. Across all of Star Trek TOS, few moments are as quietly heartbreaking as the sequence where Spock, the embodiment of Vulcan logic and discipline, suddenly becomes a man full of feeling. It is the scene NBC cut down so heavily that nearly half of its emotional power was lost. In the original cut of This Side of Paradise, when Layla Kalomi touches the spore-releasing plant and Spock accidentally inhales the spores, the transformation happens like an instant thaw. Spock smiles, not the polite, guarded smile he occasionally gives, but a genuine soft smile that feels like the audience is witnessing a secret Spock has hidden his entire life. The field scene that follows is the true heart of the episode. Spock wraps his arms around Layla for a long time, gentle, hesitant, as if he is relearning how to touch someone he loves. Layla leans into his shoulder, breathing in, as though she has finally stepped back into a moment she has waited for far too long. The camera stays close on them for more than 10 seconds, a bold choice for 1960s television. The warm afternoon light, drifting spores, and soft movement of the grass create a romantic yet melancholic frame. The audience knows Spock is only human because of the spore's temporary influence. It was this extended intimacy that made NBC intervene immediately. The long embrace and prolonged kiss, paired with a male lead losing emotional control, were judged to exceed primetime standards. NBC's order was explicit. Cut it shorter. Reduce the close-ups. Do not let the embrace linger. As a result, the broadcast version contains only a few brief beats, enough to understand what is happening, but not enough to feel what is happening. The cuts weakened what was meant to be one of Spock's rarest human moments. In the original, viewers could truly feel that he was capable of love and tenderness, which would make his forced return to cold Vulcan logic far more emotionally devastating. NBC erased the most beautiful part of that moment simply because it was too human for a character they wanted to keep safe for family television. 5. The forbidden erotic sequence. Why NBC didn't dare. Air the first pilot. In Star Trek's very first pilot, the caged Gene Roddenberry wanted to create a mature philosophical story that didn't shy away from unsettling themes like manipulated desire and mental control. But that ambition was exactly what turned the episode into NBC's abandoned child locked away for years before audiences could see it in full. In the original footage, Captain Christopher Pike is imprisoned by the Talosians, a species capable of generating total sensory illusions. Instead of physical torture, the Talosians probe the most intimate and vulnerable regions of the human mind. They place Pike on a sunlit beach with a woman he once loved, then force him to perform romantic moments as if he were part of a real couple. There is no explicit physical intimacy, but the lightly erotic atmosphere and the metaphor of mind-forced affection are unmistakable in the body language framing and extended close-ups of Pike resisting their manipulation. For NBC, this was a dangerous line. A slow, psychological, sensual, allegory-rich pilot completely incompatible with the family primetime standards of 1965. In an internal memo, NBC listed the 3 reasons for rejection: too cerebral, too slow, too erotic. It was a direct blow to Roddenberry's vision. The pilot, costly ambitious and the most creatively daring piece of the series at the time, was rejected outright. Roddenberry was forced to start over and create a second pilot where no man has gone before, faster, less philosophical and nearly devoid of sensual or psychologically charged content. The consequence: the Cage was shelved, resurfacing years later, only when repurposed for the 2-part episode, The Menagerie, 1966. When audiences finally saw it, they immediately recognized that The Cage felt more like a psychological, philosophical film than a science fiction adventure. It was so distinct that it seemed too modern for its own era. NBC's rejection of The Cage revealed a larger truth: the censorship of 1960s television was strong enough to suffocate even groundbreaking ideas. Star Trek may have told stories about the future, but it was still chained to the very earthly limits of the time in which it was born. 4. Where no man has gone before, the pilot that had its philosophy. Silently stripped away. When The Cage was rejected by NBC for being too philosophical, too slow, too adult, Gene Roddenberry understood that the second pilot had to obey a new rule: faster, less cerebral, more watchable. But few people know that Where No Man Has Gone Before was originally a very different episode, deeper, more psychological and far more argument-driven. In the earliest cut, Kirk and Spock spend considerable screen time analysing Gary Mitchell's transformation, an ordinary man evolving into a being of godlike power. Their conversations stretch on for minutes, with Spock warning that Mitchell has moved beyond human nature, while Kirk clings to memory and friendship. The camera holds on long, uninterrupted dialogue shots, no music, no cutaways, no action. It was pure Roddenberry science fiction built on philosophy. NBC rejected it immediately. After reviewing the initial cut, they issued a strict directive: no slow pacing, no philosophy, no dialogue that runs longer than 20 seconds. This forced the production team to restructure the entire episode. Philosophical disputes were shortened or removed. Reflective character moments were cut. Psychological tension was replaced with action effects and physical conflict. The broadcast version became a fast-moving, accessible story. Gary Mitchell displaying his powers, Kirk forced into a deadly confrontation, and nearly everything expressed through action rather than dialogue. But this compromise accidentally produced a formula that would define Star Trek for decades. Philosophy wrapped inside adventure, just deep enough to be unique, just light enough not to alarm NBC. From that moment on, Star Trek's narrative style crystallized: intelligent but not too intellectual, measured but never too slow, always balancing grand ideas with mainstream pacing. A heavily altered pilot, but one that laid the foundation for how Star Trek would survive between two worlds: the artist's creative freedom and the rigid limits of 1960s American television. 3. The buried lines. The dark truth behind Helen Knowles' role in Dagger of the Mind. The tension doesn't solely come from Kirk strapped into the mind-controlling device. It also comes from Dr. Helen Knoll, the one person who fully understands how dangerous the neural neutralizer truly is. Yet most of her strength as a character never made it to air because NBC quietly removed several key lines of dialogue. In the original footage, when Kirk begins to lose control of his own will, Knoll does not stand by passively as shown in the broadcast version. She tries fiercely to pull him back to reality with urgent, emotionally charged pleas, calling his name, his rank, and reminding him of his real memories. Two crucial lines that were supposed to be included, but were completely erased. Were Jim fight him? Those aren't your memories. He's forcing you. Don't let him rewrite your will. These lines positioned Noel as Kirk's sole psychological anchor during the moment he's mentally assaulted. But when NBC reviewed the cut, they argued the dialogue felt intimately coercive, especially because earlier in the episode, there's a hinted, ambiguous past encounter between Noel and Kirk at a Christmas party. Having a woman plead with Kirk during a scene of mental violation was deemed too sensitive, too suggestive for prime time. NBC also feared the moment would read as too heavy on psychological coercion, a subject 1960s television avoided aggressively. So the network ordered all of Noel's mind intervention lines removed, reducing her role to that of a silent observer. The result: Helen Noel, originally written as an intelligent, proactive woman who stands up to power, is muted in her most crucial moment. Her depth is flattened. Instead of challenging Dr. Adams with logic and courage, she becomes a bystander who only acts when absolutely forced to. A small edit, but one that fundamentally changed Noel's standing and exposed how censorship smothered strong female portrayals in Star Trek, even as the series attempted to be ahead of its time in giving women a voice. 2. Shore Leave, the female body censorship. NBC forced camera changes for being too suggestive. Shore Leave is one of the strangest episodes of Star Trek TOS, playful, surreal, and almost completely free of darkness. But what viewers never knew is that the original cut leaned in far more adult direction. And it was this excessive freshness that triggered harsh intervention from NBC, leading to altered camera angles and a full reshaping of the episode's visual rhythm. In the first cut, the illusions on the pleasure planet were presented with noticeably more sensual undertones. When the female characters, especially the illusionary women designed to attract or test members of the crew, entered the frame, cameras were originally placed at lower angles, making their bodies fill more of the screen. Certain movements like turning the body, stepping close to the camera, or leaning in while speaking with Kirk or McCoy were intentionally choreographed to create a sense of allure and heighten the fantasy paradise illusion. But when NBC reviewed the cut, they deemed the images too fresh for family broadcast standards, especially since Shore Leave aired in a time slot when children could be watching. Short skirts, tight close-ups of smiling faces, and a handful of overly sensual gestures were instantly flagged in the censorship notes. NBC demanded immediate changes. Low-angle shots were raised. Close-ups were replaced with wider, medium shots. Certain actor movements were reshot or removed entirely. One sequence of an illusionary woman circling Kirk, originally filmed with a soft, seductive flow, was dramatically shortened. This intervention stripped away the episode's intended adult fantasy layer. Without the blend of illusion, desire, and psychological curiosity, Shore Leave became a lighter, more conventional adventure episode, exactly the tone NBC wanted to preserve. 1. The Copied Body. The sequence that made US television. Fear, Sex and Androids in What Are Little Girls, made of Star Trek, confronted a theme both daring and disturbing: the boundary between human beings and artificial creation. But what viewers never saw was that the original version leaned even more heavily into body imagery enough that NBC immediately stepped in to smooth out the edges and avoid controversy. In the first cut, the sequence depicting how android bodies are created was surprisingly direct. The body scanning machine sweeps over the contours of real human skin before transferring them into an artificial body. The camera includes close-ups of shoulders, necks, arms, and even the upper torso of the duplicate shots designed to emphasize the unsettling precision of rebuilding a human through technology. When Andrea's android form appears, the camera lingers on angles highlighting the nearly inhuman perfection of her body, smooth, flawless, beautiful, in a way that is unnervingly ideal. those details unintentionally gave the scene a tone of physical objectification, evoking both sexual metaphor and the anxiety of men creating their own ideal woman. And that was exactly why NBC intervened. The censorship memo stated clearly, concern over excessive sensuality and the objectification of human-machine bodies. As a result, body close-ups were removed or replaced with wider shots. Transitions between organic and android forms were shortened. Camera angles emphasizing Andrea's physique were changed to more neutral front-facing framings. NBC feared that an episode featuring this much focus on replicated bodies would provoke backlash from parents who still viewed Star Trek as a family-friendly science adventure program. These edits significantly weakened the episode's central theme, the horror of technology perfectly imitating the human form. The broadcast cut became safer, less sensual, but also far less unsettling. The warning about artificial human replication and the moral consequences behind it lost much of its intended bite. After opening each of these sealed doors, it becomes clear that Star Trek was never just a pioneering science fiction series. It was an underground battle between bold ideas and the invisible rules that suffocated American television in the 1960s. NBC didn't merely cut scenes, they cut emotion philosophy resistance, and sometimes even the voices of characters meant to be the strongest. Ironically, the deleted scenes themselves proved why Star Trek became a legend. Within those hidden frames lies a series that dared to go farther, push harder, and challenge the moral boundaries of its time. And now that you've travelled through Star Trek's buried history, what do you think Star Trek would have become without censorship? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive video.